Welcome back, everyone, to the next episode of the Why I Don't Like podcast. I'm your host, Christian Ashley, here to entertain you as I sit down and record episodes on the media that I consume and yet I don't like. Apologies, it has been several weeks since the last episode I recorded. Most of that was because I was all over the place this summer and getting ready for the new semester as well as finishing summer classes. So I have been at church camps. I have been at different locations with family to see them. So I have had next to no time for this, but I'm back. We're here to get this done. Thank you for your immense patience as we continue on here through this Why I Don't Like series. We're going to be in Mushoku Tensei again, Jobless Reincarnation, focusing on season 1, part 2, episodes 15 through 17. Just as a reminder, there are no edits to this show. I'm not an editor, don't know what to do, and don't have the money to hire someone else to do it. So if that's something that kind of gives you, I don't know about that vibes, well, go in peace. There'll be no hard feelings on my end. So, quick shout out, real quick, to a YouTube listener. If I butcher your name, I'm sorry. Jawara Fraser, or maybe Fraser, 8530. They corrected me on how Gallus ends up in the series. I incorrectly stated that he died during the fight with Rudius, the Sacred Beast, so on and so forth. But in fact, Gallus gets imprisoned for his crimes. So no death. My bad on that. And I would also like to thank you for your insights on the nature of the man god. It seems like I'm on the right track, shall we say. Now, as I like to do for every show, we're going to start with something that I do like, and that is Smile Pretty Cure. Now, if you have never gotten to the Pretty Cure series, this is several seasons deep in. This is not my favorite of the bunch, but it is a favorite, shall we say. And antithetically to everything we're discussing today, it's a very cutesy series, very fun series about a bunch of girls becoming magical girls, saving the world from threats along the way. Nice and easy, low stakes for the most part, very fun. But you didn't come here to talk about Smile Pretty Cure. You came here to hear me talk about Mushoku Tensei and why I don't like it. So we're going to be starting today in episode 15, Slow Life in the Doldia Village. Well, we begin here with Eris splash fighting with two of the other underage girls of the village who will receive names in a bit in the midst of the rain while they are bathing, and then it becomes a tickle fight. Normally, pretty harmless things, but remember what show we're in, or remember who our main character is. Because we see Rudy is spying on them from a hole in the box he's in. I don't know if that's supposed to be like a Metal Gear reference or if he's just that horny. I guess Rudius could be both. As we see, the Sacred Beast is interrupting his very noble efforts in what would be a funny scene in almost any other series were we not dealing with the subject matter of underage girls bathing and being peeped on by a person who is, let's say, over 30 years their senior mentally. There's that. He's found out by Gies, who asks him what he's doing, even though he knows the answer, as Rudius claims to just be people watching, which is a noticeable pastime of his, until Gies calls him out for his sexual perversions and threatens him if he touches his daughter. So there's that. That is our opening scene of the episode, ladies and gentlemen. Wonderful. I don't know if I focused on this before, but there's when I break up scenes, I don't always, do every single scene I have to stop, but I have notes for like, here's what I want the topic of discussion to be. And every single episode I've done, there's always been 3-word phrase. Rudius being Rudius as the topic of discussion. And that has not changed for this episode. In fact, we're starting off with that. I mean, what else can I say? I mean, is there a new way to say I hate it? That I think it's bad? That I think our main character should be a lot better than this? I mean, please leave a comment down below. It's like, how can I reword this? Because I'm going to have to say it again. We're only in season 1. We have another season to get to, and there's going to be a season 3 down the road forever from now. So, like, gosh, please just help me. What am I supposed to say and do for this one? Like, I desperately need your help. It's terrible. Once again, I don't care how many times I have to say it. This is an older man in a younger body looking at underage girls in a sexual manner. And we're supposed to be on his side. You know why? Because this keeps happening. We're supposed to think this is funny. We're supposed to be, oh, well, the dad's there. You know, just be like, oh, I'll kill you if you do anything to my daughter. It's like, no. The only reason Rudius is not dead right now is because he just saved the village. Otherwise, that'd be a dead kid. Because, I mean, especially if the dad knew what Rudius actually was, that'd be a whole different issue. But that's it. Moving on from there, we see Gallus in prison, as I erroneously stated earlier that he was dead. He's in fact alive. As life continues on in the village, as they eat dinner with the village chief and his family, Eris teaches Minitona and Tersina, who are the two young girls there, how to speak her language, which makes Rudius proud, which is a really good moment for him and her. You're like, oh, well, the student has become the teacher. That's really good. Gies asks Eris about her ring, and she reveals that Ghislaine gave it to her on her 10th birthday, which makes Gies freak out as Ghislaine left their village and their sacred duty to protect the sacred beast behind, and he figured that she had long died in the ditch somewhere. Now, Eris gets incredibly angry about this, as you can imagine, and she leaves. Excuse me, when he leaves, and she talks about how Ghislaine's her master, how she has always protected her by being strong, and this completely surprises. Yes, as you know, Ghislaine being respected is not something that he's accustomed to. Now, Rudius attempts to comfort Eris, telling her that the Ghislaine they know is different from the perception of the perception that the village itself has of her, which surprises Gies further because hey, now there's two people independently saying this. Now, Eris reminisces about Ghislaine as the girls come by later on to ask her about their Aunt Ghislaine because she is Gies's younger sister, which explains some of the hostility he feels towards her. Minitona confides that she doesn't like sword training with her dad, as he's far too aggressive, and he's warned her to not be like Ghislaine. Now, Eris tells her that she doesn't have to like it and comforts her as she hates studying too in a very sweet moment, and she's grateful to Ghislaine for teaching her to wield a sword. Minitona then asks if she can teach her how to wield the sword, which she agrees to as Gies is listening in on them from a hiding place. Now, here we go into the character of Ghislaine, who is not here to defend herself. And that's fine from a character point of view here because we have family who has known her at a different stage in her life. Much in the same way we met Roxy's parents in a couple of episodes ago. That was handled fairly well. Now we have Ghislaine's family doing the same thing. Now, obviously, very different characters, Roxy and Ghislaine, but you see what I'm trying to put together there. So the Ghislaine we know is a little harsh, a little not crude, but not exactly what's the word I'm looking for here. Uh, Not quite a noble lady, we'll put it that way. But she's a protector. But she's someone who's curious. She's willing to learn. She's willing to be taught, which are two great things. It's one thing to be willing to learn, it's another to be willing to be taught. And Ghislaine has that in spades. And she maintains her job of protecting Eris, of protecting the Grey Rat family in an amazing way. And in fact, before the Mana Cataclysm, she was attempting to do that very thing before she was swept away before the rest of them. And that's the Ghislaine that Eris and Rudius know. But the Ghislaine of the village chief and his family, they don't know that Ghislaine. So it's very easy for us, for a person in our lives, we knew they were very rough and had nothing of, sometimes value would be the word to use, but nothing of no charity or goodness inside of their hearts, and they leave. And then later on, you encounter them, or maybe you hear someone else talking about them, and it's like you're talking about a completely different person. Well, that's what happens in most people's lives when they do an honest self-assessment of themselves. And I think that's something we need to be careful of because there are plenty of people who can go, oh, they were just worthless, they were trash, can't stand them, and they're never going to amount to anything. Well, some people do, but not everyone does. And we need to be willing to at least reflect on that, as we'll see Gies and his family do throughout this episode, on that fact, because Ghislaine has changed. We also start here Eris as mentor, which will give the rest of this episode. And it's very fun to see her in this role because she's usually the one learning. But now she's met two other girls, a little younger than her, but someone she can relate with who want to be taught. And as someone who's had to learn, yeah, it's not her favorite thing in the world, but she sees a willingness in someone else and reaches out and responds and does, as we'll see, a pretty good job to the point where the girls don't want her to leave because she's just that good. And I think that's remarkable about her. It's a very well done bit of character. What's some here? Focus here for her and for Ghislaine's family as well, in a very well written part of the episode, and I'm assuming a well written part of the light novels as well. So hey, the show is called Why I Don't Like, but not because I'm here to just tell you about everything I hate. There are things that are well done. I want to speak about them. I'm sure some people are tired of me saying stuff like that. So we'll just move on to our next scene where we see Eris, later on teaching and sparring with Minitona as Rudius is watching with Gies, who remarks that she always told him she wouldn't train before. And he then asks if it's true that Ghislaine is Eris's master. And Rudius says yes, also calls her a sword queen, which he finds fascinating. And then he laughs when he learns that she's also being taught magic by Rudius, thinking that it's a joke until Rudius confirms that it's true. And that she's learning other skills as well, and says that people change in a very, what's the word I'm looking for here? A very good outlook. That's not the word I'm looking for, but I'll use that for now. On the situation. Now, after training, Tersina remarks on the rainy season almost being over, and Eris wonders when they'll go to the next village, as they have to continue on towards her place, to Fatoa, to go find her family, which makes Minitona upset because she doesn't want Eris to leave. But Eris reminds her that she has a home to get back to, and this upsets her even more. Meanwhile, Rudius has made a new Rougerd figurine as his former female jailer. I could not remember her name or if there is one or not. So I apologize for that. If she has been named, I just forgot. And she tells him as he's playing with the sacred beast that it is supposed to accompany the hero or a hero in times of crisis, and chastises him for being too physical with the dog. I think this maybe just be a cultural thing that they're just not overly affectionate with dogs, even though this is Rudius we're talking about. I will show him some benefit of the doubt here. Like, he's just having fun with a big floof ball. Now, I am not that kind of person. I don't remember if I talked about this last time. I like dogs from a distance. I'm not going to be the one to like, oh, who's a good boy, and like wrap myself around them because then I feel dirty. But other people can do that and just enjoying affection with the dog, and they're just having fun. But Rudius's face being Rudius's face, it sometimes looks like perversion. I can't imagine why they would ever think that. So, as they're talking, Tersina comes in and then tells them that Eris and Minitona are fighting as they go to break it up. And Tersina has been crafting a figurine of her own. After the two girls just have a bit of a, shall we say, a disagreement, physical disagreement, the two young Beast King go elsewhere. Eris goes to her room. Minitona is sulking because Eris is about to leave. She doesn't want that to happen. And we see Gies go to talk to her about going, to see Eris off as they leave, as he talks about how Ghislaine used to be monstrous in manner until a traveling swordsman took her off their hands, and he regrets that he wasn't friendlier to her. Like, that was just her kind of personality. Eris is also sulking as the girls are hiding nearby, and Rudius leaves to let them speak. Minitona apologizes for being selfish, and Eris forgives her as they give her the figurines they made of her and Rudius, and they make up. I think one of the biggest themes of this episode, I mean, plainly stated, is people change. And we see that through, the village's perception of Ghislaine versus Rudius and Eris's perception, and as well as Eris herself from who she used to be, the stuck up, noble, I don't need to learn how to read or write or use magic or anything or learn swordplay. I'm going to be whatever I want to be, into this young woman who is humble enough to teach. So she's not gaining anything from this other than hanging out with someone who is a peer and teaching her swordplay. That heiress is not the same heiress of before. And to a certain very, very, very small extent, Rudius is not the same person he was. And as we see through these episodes, he's still got a lot of growing up to do, even despite the fact that he's still 40 something years old mentally. But that's another problem for another day. But I think that the idea of people change, that's a good message to send out because most people are not static. Most people learn from their experiences, figure out what to do with their lives. They're like, man, or do some serious stuff reflection and go, I was a jerk. I hurt those people. I shouldn't do that. And then go back and apologize. Or if they're not able to find those people, they can at least make the people in their lives right now feel better and reach out to them and understand them more. People change. And Ruger would be a great example. He's not really a focus of this episode in particular, but himself, what he had to endure during the war several hundred years ago, into the man he is now, and being willing to listen to someone like Rudius, who is wanting to help him out in that regard, shows immense change for a person. And I like that a lot. As we move on, we see the chief thanking Rugerd and everyone else for their help. And Rudius kind of notices that Rugerd and the chief have become friends in this time. He's like, oh, they've had, several months to do this, so that's good. Eris cries as, she says goodbye to the girls. Gies asks her to spar with him before they leave, and she does so, barely losing to him after one blow is exchanged. And she even very in an un-Eris-like manner, thanks him for the time. This next time that she'll win. They didn't leave the village and say their goodbyes, promising to return, and they're joined by Geese, who is making a break for it, has escaped imprisonment to join them on their journey. And he explains that they're on the road to the holy country of Milis, saying to the founder of St. Milis once used a sword strike to break through forests and mountains in one swing. Rudius comments on a stone marking nearby, and Geese explains that they're a monument to the seven great powers, who supposedly are the seven strongest fighters in the world. They're known as Technique God, Dragon God, Battle God, Demon God, Death God, Sword God, and North God. And Rugerd comments that he once wanted to be counted among their number, which makes Eris immensely, in a very Goku kind of fashion, want to meet them and probably fight with them. But Geese says that they're probably just like an old wives' tale. And Rudy has had skepticism about some of the feats that he was talking about. So there's that. And Rudius thinks to himself that if they met someone who Rugerd couldn't beat, they'd end up dead. It's foreshadowing. Fairly well done foreshadowing, I will say. World building. The world building of this last bit of the episode is immensely well done. The farewell scene is fine, it's whatever. But like learning more about the world, I always appreciate that. I want to focus on that for just a little bit. In that Geese seems to know a lot. Now, who this guy is, I have some reservations about him. I don't think he's an out and out villain, but I also think he's the kind of person who might, if things went a certain way, sell out people or try to get his own way or something like that. I could be wrong, but let's just say I was spot on about the man god apparently, so maybe I'm 2 for 2. But his explanations of what the country they're going to, which by the way is where Zenith is from, if I recall correctly. The lore behind how St. Milis did what St. Milis did, as well as the stone markings. Like this, they could have just crossed in a road, could have just been a feature in the background, but the author specifically focused on those things to set up something that will occur later on. So this is a great case of foreshadowing, and Rudius's feelings on it as well, because there are beings out there who are wandering around the world that are just stronger than everyone else. I don't think we've gotten names for all of them, if I recall correctly, at least from what I've watched. But maybe the light novel's done that. I don't know. So leave a comment down below if it is. But yeah, that's a good enough episode. Um, there is a better episode in this list, I will say that. Then we get to episode 16, Family Squabble. On the road, the group ends up at the capital of Militian, and Geese leaves them, promising to come back and teach Eris to cook, which she wants to learn to impress Rudius as he finds out, and like mentally he's teasing her. Not a bad scene, except for Rudius being way older than he is, but that's another problem. But before he goes, Geese tells Rudius to go to the Adventurers Guild. And I got to say, I really love the design of the city. As you can see, if you're on YouTube right now, of it's not really a Venice, but actually, would Mexico City be a better one? The Aztecs built on it, and then later it was built more on that. I want to say that's correct. Correct me in the comments down below if I got that wrong. But yeah, that's extremely well drawn. By the way, scene, good introduction, a fine opening scene. There are way worse ones, as we've already discussed. So moving on, we see Rudius, once they've entered the city, beginning the Team Dead End strategy meeting, where they discuss that it's been a year and a half and they've finally made it to human territory, and that their next stop will be Ashura. But he wants to stay behind for a little bit and earn money for the journey because they pay really well here. He also wants to work on improving relations with the Superb by giving his figurines to the people they save uh, so that they can use them as a charm while also revealing Ruger's identity at the same time. You're like, hey, here's this little figurine of the Superb, but also, by the way, that person who just saved you is one of them. That's not a terrible strategy. It's probably going to backfire on certain people, but I actually can get behind the idea. Now, Rudius wants to mass produce them, so we asked him if they can wait a little bit, and he's going to also write a letter to let everyone know that they're safe. Presumably thinking his hometown is still around, which he will find out very soon is not. So Eris wants to go goblin slaying. Oh my gosh, it's one of the worst parts of the episode. Which, of course, makes Rudius think of the erotic things that could go wrong from that. He has evidently watched the first episode of Goblin Slayer, one of the most worthless pieces of media to ever exist in the world. Definitely a candidate for why I don't like, because there are certain things I've learned about the series since then that if they didn't do what they do about goblins, making them a bunch of rapists, it would be a fairly interesting world. But I digress. If you want to cover Goblin Slayer in an anime segment after we've done the next couple genres, let me know. I'll soldier through it. God help me. So goblin slaying, he thinks erotic things, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. But Ruijerd encourages him to let her go, and Rudius kind of like non-subtly asks Ruijerd to watch out for her while she's doing that. So the plans of this scene. Very smart. Look, for all of his faults, Rudius is smart. It's a very wise decision here. Like, yeah, we have the money right now, but what if we don't later on? From what he's learned about the city, hey, they pay a lot for jobs here. Let's do that right here. Makes perfect sense. I'm behind this idea. And Eris getting experience on her own, to just goblin slay, stuff like that. Ruijerd watching over, perfect. No notes. Next up, Rudius thinks that kind of reflects and thinks that, hey, this is the first time that he's ever written a letter to Paul. Because if you'll recall, Paul had asked him not to write back home while he was at the Grey Rat's house. So he didn't do that out of respect. And they didn't get a chance to talk because of the monsters acting up and all that. So as he's about to write that letter, he witnesses what appears to be a kidnapper and decides to go after them after complaining. Our main character, everyone. He complains, oh no, someone's kidnapped. I guess I gotta go save them. So noble, so worthy of his abilities right here. There's something to say, being like, "Hey, don't have a gun. I don't have anything to defend myself with. How can I get involved besides like letting the proper authorities know what's going on so that they can take care of it?" Yeah, that's something to be said. Um, versus like a bystander being like, "Ah, I have nothing to do," or someone else will take care of it. Versus someone like Rudius who actually has the firepower to back up, like being heroic in this regard. I kind of cut him less slack in that regard. But he eventually agrees to do it because, as he notes, like there are two rules of dead end. Never abandon the child, and I forget the other one off the top of my head. But yeah, so he follows them and sees them feeding their victim, which is a tip off something else, in what looks like a church. He looks around and the boxes and crates and stuff and finds some panties and puts them on his face after he can't help but declare what they are out loud like an idiot. You may notice I have opinions on this. We'll get there when we get there. Now, he then pretends like he's some hero and confronts them after he's already said he put him on his face, blah, 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 saying that he's Ruijerd of Dead End, apologizing inwardly to Ruijerd for this because why does he got to throw Ruijerd on the bus? I don't know. He's an idiot. For all of his intelligence, he's an idiot. And he then beats up the kidnappers as more people come, one of whom, a very buxom woman, complains that he's wearing her panties. And he sniffs them and fights the woman, unable to look away from her breasts as she fights. There's that. Now, the leader of this group then arrives, drunk, as Rudius realizes that he's Paul when they fight, and Paul realizes he's Rudius when he slashes the panties off of his face. There we go. And a very haggard-looking Paul at that, if you can look on YouTube there. The fight. Once again, Rudius being Rudius, ruining everything. Rudius ruins everything. This would be so interesting. A lot more interesting because it is interesting. This would be so much more interesting if he would just stop acting like himself. Like, we already see in this that he uses his earth magic to like get through the wall and not be seen. If he doesn't want to get found out, why doesn't he just make like an earthen mask of some sort? Why does it have to be perverted? Because the author thinks it's funny. Because he looks at you and I and thinks that we're not, you know, capable of handling a story if something stupid like this doesn't happen. I despise what happens right here so much. And then to compound it by realizing, oh, one of the people working with this group, oh, it's actually her set that it's on my face right now. Looks her in the eye and sniffs them. Are you kidding me? Why? Why would you do that? What purpose does it serve? For that intimidation? Because, yeah, sure. Now you're going to get beat up on because you acted in that stupid manner. That makes no sense at all. I hate it. I hate everything about what just happened there. Because what should be a fight, and yes, sure, yeah, the woman in character whose name escapes me at this moment, I think it comes up later on, like Vieira or something like that, is very busty. Sure. And in very little clothing. I wonder who designed that. Probably a male author. Oh, imagine that. That's exactly what happened. So, yeah, there's nothing wrong with having, a busty female fighting someone. And there's nothing wrong with noticing, hey, she's got big breasts. But it's when you make it like this that I have an immense problem. There's the gynaxing involved in this scene. If you don't know what gynaxing is, Gynex is used to be an anime company until they ended up a couple of them left and made Studio Trigger, if I remember correctly. But they did Neon Genesis Evangelion, Gunbuster, Nadia, and so much more. They're famous for their Gynex, which is characters with larger breasts. At the drop of a hat, those breasts will bounce. And yeah, that's where that term comes from. There's nothing wrong inherently with that. It's the situation we're in that I have a huge problem with this because, like, as compared to someone like Noriko Takaya, who is one of my favorite characters of all time, who Gynexes immensely in Gunbuster. That's one of the reasons why they did what they did for her character design in the show, is to have her like that. But she's so much more than that. And this character here, there's a backstory there, but it's undercut immensely by who Rudius is. Having a character like her compared to someone like Noriko Takaya, who, by the way, like I said, is one of my favorite characters of all time and one of my favorite anime of all time. There's a way to handle fan service, and it's not like this. There's a way to handle your main character noticing someone's physical attributes, and it's not like this. I hate it so much. But what is good about this scene is the reveal. They've been searching. We know that Paul had asked Roxy to go find Rudius, so we know he's out there in the world looking for him, but they happen to find him here. And it's not random. It's not, what's the word I'm looking for here? It's not, why can I not think tonight? This is so bad. I think I'm just angry. It's not coincidence. Like, it makes sense for Paul to be here. It makes sense for Rudius to be here in this city because they're both searching different goals that happen to align here. This is good that they do meet in these circumstances. Well, not these exact circumstances, but that they do meet. And the reveal, you see him kind of come in, and you're like, "What? Wait, could that be who I think it is?" You see him kind of slouching around like in drunken manner, and then you see he's still got the skills, and he's thinking, "Oh, he fights kind of like him." And you go, "Like him? Who? Oh, his son." And the reveal of them both finding out who the other is, that is very well handled. So we'll move on from there to the next scene, where everyone has regrouped and explained what they were doing at a bar. Now, Paul, looking haggard, tells Rudius that he's glad he's still alive. And Rudius asks why he's there because he never received Paul's message, and Paul asks what he's been doing. So Rudius explains in a very grandiose manner what he's done, which makes Paul angry because of how carefree Rudius has been acting about it. And Paul thinks that, Rudius has been goofing off while he's been searching for their family, and asks him why he didn't look for other survivors of the cataclysm. And Paul then further disparages Rudius for playing a hero and goofing off, and questions him on why he never wrote him before, perhaps because he was concerned that there might be a rival for Eris's affections if he did so. Now, Paul doesn't know Rudius didn't get the letter, and so on and so forth, but kind of cuts deep, Paul. But he's not in the most rational state of mind, so we'll give him a little grace that way. And Paul's group attempts to try and calm him down, and Rudius, noticing the girls in the party, mocks Paul, wondering what Zenith and oh my gosh, Zenith and Lilia would think if they saw him hanging around pretty women like them, and wonders if he might have a new brother or sister on the way soon, making Paul punch him in the face. Child abuse, absolutely. Satisfying to watch and slow-mo and, and to take a screen cap of for YouTube. Oh, so satisfying. Now, Rudius then fights him back and uses his magic eye to get away from Paul's blows, making him kind of go, how's he able to dodge me? Has he gotten that better or something like that? Or am I just drunk? And he then punches Paul repeatedly on the ground until he is stopped by a young woman he recognizes as Norn, who asks him to stop hurting her daddy. And she gets angry at him for bullying Paul, in her words, which makes Rudius stop. And Rudius decides to leave, as Paul explains that everyone in Buena Village got separated by the Mana Cataclysm, which is what he wrote in his letter, expecting Rudius to receive it at Zant Port. Rudius then realizes that he never thought that his town was caught in the teleportation, and he asks about Sylphie, which angers Paul further because he asked about her first before his own mother. A good point to a very deranged man, but a good point nonetheless. Because she is also lost alongside Lilia and Aisha. Paul's been looking for the survivors, who oftentimes get enslaved because they ended up in a foreign land without anyone to help them. Rudius recognizes that the boy that he thought was kidnapped earlier was actually one of the kids who used to bully Sylphie back in the day. And Paul tells Rudius that he thought, as smart as Rudius was, that he would have been researching the phenomenon and found out what they could do about it. But instead, he's been wasting his time on other matters. Rudius then leaves and goes back to his room, just talking aloud about what happened, about how he could possibly make things up to Paul. Then he goes out of the window to throw his head out and throws up, disgusted at himself for what he didn't do. At around that time, Eris returns from slaying goblins, excited until she sees Rudius, who explains what happened. Rudyard arrives with her. Eris decides that she's going to murder Paul until Rudyard stops her, telling her to comfort Rudius, which she does after fidgeting for a bit. And it's very un-Eris action she's about to perform here, but she does it anyway by hugging him and telling Rudius that, hey, it's going to be all right. And she's here for him, even if she's not good at doing this thing. And he accepts what she has to say. Let's start with Paul's concerns. For the last year and a half, Paul has received no word about his son, his 2 wives, and 1 of his daughters, as well as Sylphie and the other people of his village. That's a lot. That's an immense burden to put on a man, who, by the way, is supposed to be the leader of this village in many regards. No wonder he broke. I don't blame him. That amount of responsibility and an unforeseeable tragedy like this is unprecedented in history, unless something else has come up later on. But this is unprecedented. And he's been shouldering this burden. He's been trying to find people. He's been freeing other people from slavery and looking out for his family, and had nothing except Norn around him this entire time. No wonder he drinks himself to excess. Is it the right thing to do? Of course not. But it's understandable. Now, his actions and how he talks to Rudius? No, absolutely not. Very poorly handled by a father. Like, I joke about Rudius being punched in the face, and he definitely deserves it, but that's not how you handle your child in this situation. And Paul gets angry because, as far as he's aware, Rudius read his letter and did nothing. Never reached out to him. And the way Rudius describes his escapades, he leaves out a lot of the peril. He leaves out a lot of the bad things that happen because he's just trying to make his dad feel okay. That he's been fine. It's all right. Because Rudius doesn't know what happened to his town because he didn't think about them being affected by it. Which, if I recall correctly, I don't know if that ever actually comes to his mind when that happens. I think their main concern is just getting back. They never thought, well, maybe this happened in my hometown too. It didn't just happen in Fatoa. So this is a good conflict. I will give it that, and between Rudius and Paul, because of misunderstandings and because of expectations placed on the other. And Rudius recognizes he should have thought about these things. The whole time he was in the demon continent, he could have been looking to see if there were other people who were taken. Maybe it wasn't just them. But he didn't, because he was focusing on himself and focusing on the things he cared about. But Paul didn't just do that. And that's a point in his favor. Excuse me. Now, as well, remember, Paul thinks Rudius is only 11 years old. He thrusts this on him, and that's unreasonable of an 11-year-old child, even one as smart as Rudius. It is not unreasonable for Paul to put this on someone who is over 40 years old mentally, who should know better and who should have been asking these questions. That, if Paul knew who Rudius actually is, this argument is definitely in his favor more than 100%. But he doesn't know that because his son doesn't speak with him, because his son is a coward. And because of that timidity, Paul's left in the dark through no fault of his own. And Rudius gets away with that part because we'll see a reconciliation later on. But would have been a lot better if, say, someone had mentioned some certain things about themselves. But that's that. Next episode, 17, is Reunion. Paul, in flashback with Norn, after the monocataclysm has happened, sees everyone else has disappeared and decides to find them all. And there seems to be really no real rhyme or reason for why this occurred. Like, why did it take some people and leave others behind? That's one of the fascinating aspects of this mystery that as we see what happens later on in the series. Paul then gets in contact with others and, starts organizing efforts to track the lost people down, saving many from slavery, including some of the girls that we've seen in his party right now. I think their names are Vieira and Shiera or something like that. Which is which, I can't remember. As Norn, throughout this whole time, is watching him reverently because that's her dad. Her dad's acting like a hero. Her mom's gone. Her sister's gone. Her brother's gone. But she has him. But the weight of this all hits him, and he handles the loss with excessive alcoholism. Opening scene. Fantastic opening scene. We see the heartache Paul goes through here. And it's immense. And it's a lot to put on one person who, yeah, he was an adventurer. Yeah, he did some really cool things back in the day, but this is unprecedented. What's the manual for leading your village when they've been transported across the entire planet? And that's assuming they all survived. Your resources are gone, your money is gone, all your stuff is gone. How do you organize something like this? And yet over that year and a half, Paul did it. And that's an immense credit to him as a person while he's still trying to protect his daughter, while he's trying to track down his family. He's not just focusing on what he lost. There are other people out there who lost a lot. And he's been attempting to find them all across an entire world where it takes months, maybe even years to travel from different continents to another. That's no small task. That is a very admirable trait. Now, I've had my issues with Paul in the past, but this right here, I am on his side in that regard. I'm not on the side about certain things people say and do, but I'm with him on the idea of what's happening here. Now we did move over to the next scene to see Geese walking into the city, and he finds a drunken Paul, telling him that he'll find someone interesting if he goes to the Adventurers Guild. But when he notices that Paul is upset, he asks why. And they didn't talk about what happened, and Geese just tells him, hey, you're expecting too much from Rudius because while he's impressive, he's still a child. And Paul, at 11 years old, wouldn't have survived the demon continent. And Paul doesn't believe him, saying, oh, I wish I had it as easy as he did. There was a Superb watching over me the whole time. And he calls Rudius a genius. And Geese says that Paul's never been to the demon continent, so he has no idea just how harsh it is out there. And that Rudius did manage to get out of there, even with Rugert's help, but he had to do it while being smart about it. And Paul asks why Rudius was acting so nonchalant about the experience, and Geese points out that Rudius did that so Paul wouldn't have worried about him, and that he was trying to impress him, saying, like, what any son would like to do with his dad. Dad, did you see these cool things that I did? That's what Rudius was attempting to do. Even as someone is standoffish about him, not pretending that Paul isn't his dad in this world, to an extent. But Geese also says that Paul's just a hopeless dad who needs help and reassurance. And, he teases him and tells him to be happy that he's reunited with the son, who, by the way, is alive and whole. Like, I think Geese points out that he could have lost limbs or bled out and died or something like that. And yet he's here in front of him, and that's how he treated him. I think this is a very great scene between two different characters, one of whom I still don't really trust, but that's its own separate issue. But I think Geese has the best of intentions when it comes to Rudius and Paul and their reconciliation. Because he saw Rudius out and about, saw what he was capable of, versus what Paul, who just happened upon him in very stupid circumstances, but that's the writing's fault. Geese can actually say, look, he's capable. He's doing all these things. And yeah, things are really tough. And he left those things out because he didn't want to worry you. And he wanted you to be impressed. He wanted you to praise him for being able to do what he did. Because Rudius doesn't know what all Paul has had to suffer through this whole time. Because Paul can only think of himself, and naturally so to an extent, not that it makes it okay, but it makes sense. So you see that great conflict between the two of them, and there's no like punches being thrown or anything like that. This is word to word sparring, and Paul loses, as he should. Good scene. Next scene. Paul comes back to his people and he sits beside a sleeping Norn, smiling at her, and he has a vision of, a flashback of Rudius reacting to her birth and how excited he was, and then he sees a vision of a dead Rudius, dying Rudius, which freaks him out. He goes out and splashes some water on his face, and he decides he needs to sober up. Rudius, meanwhile, is eating some bread with Eris and Ruijerd as Paul arrives. And our great guard dog, Eris, stands in front of him, arms crossed, asks who he is, and she gets angry at him for how he's acted. And Paul, not helping the situation, calls Rudius a playboy as Ruijerd restrains Eris, and he points out to her that, hey, fathers aren't perfect. And he looks over to Paul and tells him to speak to Rudius frankly. They didn't talk to one another afterward, kind of awkwardly, bringing up Ruijerd, who Paul's not scared of because he saved the son, to his immense credit. And Paul then, apologizes for how he acted, and Rudius says that, hey, you shouldn't, because he has reflected on what Paul said, and on some of that, Paul was right. Rudius then apologizes for not finding the message, not thinking about that, and Paul tells him what was said in it. Paul then asks where Rudius is going next, as he wants to bring Eris to Fatoa, but Paul makes the reveal that it's all gone, and her family is gone as well, most likely. Rudius then says that if that doesn't work, he'll go to find the rest of his family. Now, the bartender, who's kind of been listening in on this whole thing, offers them free drinks and speaks with Rudius about the situation, saying he should look Paul in the face because they haven't been looking at each other in the face. As Rudius looks up and he sees that Paul is crying. And Rudius, it kind of makes him think of his past in Japan, where he thinks of a friend that he had who would come to his house even after he had stopped coming to school and became a shut-in, who would hang out and play video games with him, was, still his friend, still wanted to be with him, compared to everyone else who was being cruel to Rudius. Whatever his Japanese name is, we still don't know. That's such great world building there. But I distract myself. Now, the friend had unwisely made a stupid joke comment about wanting to be a shut-in because of how much that Rudius can do and get away with, which naturally makes Rudius angry because he wasn't doing this in order to slack off, but because of his situation, because of the immense bullying and oppression that he was facing. And Rudius then fought his friend, and the friend left his house behind, and their friendship was ended because both of them were just too prideful to apologize to each other. In the present, we see Rudius accepting Paul's apology. And he notes that Paul is 30 and younger than, and then younger than he was when Rudius died in the First World in Japan. So Rudius decides that compared to Paul, compared to himself, Paul's doing great, and says that they should just pretend it never happened. They then hug each other, acting as if they're meeting, for the first time since the cataclysm. Oh, I lost an image. That's not fair. It was the hugging scene. I really wanted that one. Oh well. Paul tells Rudius that he missed Rudius and he thought that he might all be dead, and he's sorry for how he acted as he cries. And Rudius says that he's sorry too. The flashback, an effective use of one. This one does a lot to show, hey, Rudius of his old life, wasn't just a loser or something like that. There was something there. Like, he had friends. He had someone he could have confided in. And yet, as a result of his emotional trauma and the physical abuse he underwent, hearing a joke, and a very poorly made joke, but it's definitely a joke I could see myself making, not thinking of the consequences of, someone else's emotional state at the time. That joke triggers him into fighting the only friend that he has left. And not being emotionally mature, allowing his pride to take control, Rudius loses the only friend he has. And he spends the next 20 some years as a shut in because he wasn't able to go out and reconcile. But what he does know here is that he can change. Hey, people change. And the Rudius of Japan wouldn't do what the Rudius of this world will do, which is apologize, hug his dad, and make up with him. That is especially powerful. But imagine how much more powerful it would have been if Paul knew who he was hugging. Because he thinks it's his son, and it is. But there's so much more going on in Rudius's mind that his own father of this world doesn't understand. He doesn't understand he's not the only father this kid has because Rudius won't open up to him. And that is an immense strike against his character. Yeah, maybe now isn't the right time to do it. I will throw that out there. But there's time to talk. There's time in the middle of this reconciling conversation to be like, hey, Dad, I've been keeping secrets from you. And he opens up. Could you imagine what that would do to Paul? Of how to learn about, a lot of things start making sense about my son. Because there's more to him. I've always thought there was more to him, but now I know for sure why he acts the way he does. Why he acts so, in some ways, more mature than other children his age. Because he's not mentally that age. This would be a great chance for Rudius to tell someone else about who he is, which outside of one person in the future, I can't think of anyone else. And the only reason he tells them is because I can't say that right now, for those of you who are watching along with me. Why doesn't he do this? Like, is it a trust issue? I don't know, because it's not focused on. And a good writer would focus. A good writer would give a reason why he can't do it. Or maybe I'm just not emotionally mature enough to talk about this thing right now. Or, well, what if he disowns me as a son? Like, you could have, those are things someone could think about, and that'd be a real reason for why this has not come out to light. Instead, it's just Rudius being selfish. And I think it would have spoken volumes for that reveal to have happened here. For father and son to, like, reintroduce themselves to each other, to put everything out on the table, but that's not what we got. We did get a good reconciliation. I don't wanna say the scene is tainted just because of that, but it could have made what is a good scene great. And that's part of why I'm doing the show, is just to be like, "Hey, I hate this thing and everything it represents," and then not offer pointers for what could make me actually like it. Or make me even love it. I like this scene. Let me put it this way, I like this scene. I would love this scene if Rudius would open up to his dad and actually call him dad instead of just Paul in a very informal, unloving manner. But that's not what happened. And we're left with this. So next scene, Rudius asks if Paul had another kid while he was gone. And Paul says, not from lack of trying. Thank you, Paul, for your subtlety. As Rudius boasts that, well, it's too bad, but he already had a genius son. So he's good on that end. And they both laugh at him for just being so shameless. Eris then walks in with a bruised eye, which she got from fighting Ruijerd as she was still angry at Paul and wanted to beat him up. But Ruijerd managed to restrain her and prevent her from doing that. Rudius explains that they reconciled, which gets Eris even angrier as Rudius explains how they're both human and made mistakes and they were able to reconcile. That's a good thing, but you know her, she's not able to take that as well. Rudius then heals Eris and they have a second meeting where they discuss how Paul gave Rudius some money so that they can go to the central continent and how Fatoa no longer exists, which Eris really does well on thinking about. As you can see in the image on YouTube, she's prepared for that much. She had thought about it as a possibility. Paul has told him that Philip and Soros are both missing alongside Ghislaine, and they agreed to go leave the city. Ruijerd tells him that he might not see Paul again, but Rudius says there's other family he might miss if he doesn't leave, so they go up and meet with Paul's group. And Paul asks Norn to say goodbye to her brother, but she refuses until Ruijerd pats her on the head and tells her to cherish her siblings as they depart, which would be a really sweet scene if I didn't know something about what happens with her and Ruijerd later on in the future that I'm not quite happy about. But that hasn't been animated yet. So there's that. Geese then appears as Rudius' group has left, reveals himself to Paul and tells Paul that he's going to look for Paul's family as well. And Paul organizes his people to do the same. Now, these ending scenes here, pretty dang good. We see how the reconciliation has gone. We see little gremlin, angry Eris, learn to back down, learn to listen to what Rudius has to say about his dad and accept it and accept the fate of her family, who may well all be dead as far as she knows. And she takes it in stride. It's obvious she's not over it, but it's a lot better than it could be. And we have Ruijerd as well, acting as the voice of reason, as he's wont to do. Taking care of them, making it sure that Rudius says goodbye to his dad, which is something I'm sure Ruijerd would really have wanted from his son before he died. But Rudius is able to do that with Paul. They have managed to restore their father-son relationship, and it's given Rudius a new goal besides heading back home: find my family. Where are they at? And he can do that. And that's it for these episodes. As far as scores go, I'm rating episode 15 a C-, especially for that opening scene. It's terrible. 16 is a B-, especially points deducted for that stupid scene in the church and what could have been handled better. But episode 17, I'm giving an A. For the most part, this is a good exploration of two different people who don't understand each other and how they can come to terms with that and still be family. I think that's handled effectively, extremely well. And what is a fun episode for this set of 3. Now, next time, if I have my numbers correct, we'll be doing 18, 19, and 20. And then we'll go on from there to 21, 22, 23. And then we'll go to the second season. So, guys, thank you all for listening on this episode. Had a really fun time with everything. The channel. And subscribe to either Systematic Geekology or the NSL Ministries podcasting pages. You can email me at whyidon'tlikepodcast@gmail.com. If you're interested in my fiction writing, you can find my works at starvingwritersguild.com or on Amazon if you search the name MC Ashley. You can also find me podcasting on Systematic Geekology and Let Nothing Move You. Special thanks to Joshua Knoll for the music he provides for the podcast. And with all that in mind, I spent a lot of time discussing what I don't like about Mushoku Tensei. But you know what I do like? You listeners. I like you. So see ya, Space Cowboys.